Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's special webinar on adaptive technologies and P2. As many of you know, we have been running two sessions today, one that started at 8:30 this morning, and of course our session that we'll be holding right now. We want to sincerely thank you for joining us today. We recognize that this is a difficult time for many people as they are trying to figure out how do we cope, how do we manage in a time of COVID-19. So thank you for taking the time to join us. My name is Amelia Shaw. I am the Executive Manager for IAP2 Canada and the Events Coordinator for IAP2 USA. And on behalf of IAP2 Canada, IAP2 Australasia, and IAP2 United States, I would like to sincerely thank you for joining us. As we get going, I would like to do quickly an land acknowledgement. We are coming to you from East Souk, British Columbia, and we acknowledge with respect that it is on the ancestral land of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples on southern Vancouver Island. Signatories to the Douglas Treaties of 1850, their traditional connection with the land continues to this day. We know that we have people on the call from all across Canada, the United States, and around the world. So we're asking everyone to just take a moment and to acknowledge the land and people in the communities and places that you live. So for all of you that are asking questions about the PowerPoints and the recording and everything else, you can expect to be receiving that from us in the next 48 hours. We are planning on sending out also the recording from session number 1, which happened at 8:30 this morning. So a few things just before we get going. This morning's call, we had about 920 people on the call. And subsequently, we experienced some technical difficulties. We have learned since that call this morning, and we made the decision to cap this session at 600 people, hoping that we won't have the same level of difficulty that we had this morning. We have also made the decision not to show our video cams as that slowed things down. So thank you while we all continue to learn on this new adventure in the times of COVID-19. So without further ado, I would like to recognize our presenters and just provide a bit of information about them. When all of this hit, IAP2 put a call out to our IAP2 family around the world asking for help. What can we do? How can we help our participants? How can we help our members? And both Susanna and Elizabeth stepped up. So I just want to truly acknowledge a thank you to them and others that have stepped up to help us with webinars or provided us with resources. So thank you. So Elizabeth Buehler, AICP, is the Civic Engagement Manager for Salt Lake City. Civic Engagement's role is to encourage public participation, best practices, support city departments in their public engagement projects, and lead citywide engagement efforts. Before her current position, Elizabeth was Salt Lake City's Homeless Services Coordinator and a Principal Planner with the Salt Lake City Planning Division. She received her Master's in Community and Regional Planning from the University of Texas at Austin. Drew, I'm just going to ask you to give Susanna the screen, please, as I introduce Susanna as well. Susanna Haas Lyons is a civic engagement specialist, bridging online and face-to-face methods. She has worked for over 17 years on large and complex engagement projects across North America. Susanna designs participation strategies, facilitates complex meetings, and provides training for better conversations between decision makers and those most impacted by the decision. Susanna is also a judge for IAP2 Canada's annual Core Values Awards, which recognizes excellence and innovation in public participation. And Susanna and Elizabeth, just before we get going, a number of people are asking about how do we share, how do we remain interactive on today's call. So a number of ways, and then I'll ask you to add more. Please put things into the question box. Everyone can see your questions, so some people may pop in and respond to them and provide ideas that you might be looking for. The other thing is, prior to today's call, we did send out 3 different opportunities on how you could provide information and share it with your colleagues. We encourage you to go in, whether it's the Google Sheet, whether it's the survey, whether it's the other Excel document, please do that also. So just wanted to quickly respond to that. And now I want to hand it over to Susanna and Elizabeth. Over to you, please.
Thanks so much. I'm going to push the limits here of the bandwidth and see if I can just bring up my screen for a minute, or my webinar webcam for a minute, just to say hi. Can you all see me?
We can. Thanks, Susanna.
So I just want to say thank you all for coming today, and we're really looking forward to chatting with you. Liz, I don't know if you want to bring up your camera for a minute to say hi too.
Hi, Liz.
So just so you know, Liz, we weren't able to hear you. You might need to unmute yourself. Not sure. All right. So
I apologize again. It's a brave new world. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today.
Awesome. Thank you. So we thought we'd start with a little bit of the online discussion guidelines, because this is, you know, a different kind of format that we're encouraging us to do here, and also,
Susanna,
yeah.
we can't see your presentation.
Great, thanks for that. Let me see if I can find it.
It's back. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So all the usual, plus because we're doing these meetings online, we encourage people to join by your computer if possible, because it is harder to collaborate by phone. It's harder to kind of watch the screen and type in your questions using the question box and all the different features. So that's something we are inviting you to do, and we would invite our participants to do as well, but inform them in advance where use possible. Often we try to use our video so that we can feel like we're human and engaging with each other. We encourage you to encourage others when you're hosting to close all other windows and applications so that we get the benefits of your full participation. That's really one of the challenges of bringing people to online spaces. I might come to participate, but I get distracted by cute cat pictures, and then I forgot what it is I was planning to do, or I'm juggling my attention. So if we can close windows, that helps. And as we've already heard, be patient with the technology. We're all learning here. So the first thing that we really recommend doing when you're bringing people together in an online space is a check-in or an introduction. And so it's some kind of short activity where participants share something about themselves, or they introduce themselves, to help people feel anchored in the experience, and also for you to get a sense of who's present and participating. Like right now, we have about 450 people that are on here, but how many people are also kind of, making lunch for their toddler or trying to juggle work calls? And so this can help us kind of get a sense of the level of engagement. And there's a lot of different ways to do it. If you have a small group, you can do it by voice. If it's about 10 to 20, you can do a chat or share an image. But over 20 people, it can be simpler and time efficient to use a poll. So that's what we're going to do. So our first question is, where are you located? And in a moment, a poll should pop up for you to respond to.
Thanks very much, Susanna. The poll is up at the moment, and some of the questions that we're getting about is, how do we use this poll? So for us, this quick poll is actually part of our GoToWebinar system, so we can answer poll questions. We can create poll questions, and we can have you answer poll questions. So hopefully that responds to the people that have asked, how does this happen? It is actually part of our GoToWebinar system. So Drew, hopefully people have had an opportunity to respond. Let's close it up and see the responses. So Susanna and Elizabeth, 33% are from Western Canada, 12% are from Eastern Canada, 38% from Western USA, 12% from Eastern USA, and 5% from other. I'm just trying to see if they've popped it in the question box. Not yet. Oh, Central United States, Minnesota. So our apologies. And South Australia and Central USA. So people from all over the place. It's wonderful, Susanna. Thanks for asking the question.
Yeah, and I want to just pause here for a second around kind of using this tool, because I think it's a good question. So how many people responded? Do you know?
So Drew, can you quickly tell how many people that are on the line actually responded to this question?
It says 82% voted, and we have 459. So we'll say about 400.
That's great. And so this, this in some ways, this isn't actually that important data because we might have that through registration or other things. So the first poll, you always want it to be a throwaway poll, that it's not the data you actually need, and you get a sense of, are people responding? And also notice what Amelia did is she talked a little bit to fill the space while the poll was happening so that it doesn't feel like some dead air. The other question we have for you is about why did you sign up for this webinar? And this is actually important information for us. We're curious about where you've come from. So over to you guys.
Thanks very much, Susanna. So we have the questions up there. I've got an engagement process all underway. Now what? I have a process due to launch in a week. Now what? I'm starting to plan for some important decisions. No burning issues. I'm just keen to learn more, and other. So if you do want to put an other, please just type it into the question box. All right, Drew, I think people will have had the opportunity to respond, so let's see what they said. So Susanna and Elizabeth, 30%. I've got an engagement process underway. 13%. I have a process due to launch in a week. 28%. I'm starting to plan for some important decisions. 19%. No burning issues. I'm just keen to learn more. We have a few people that were adding things to the other. Some of those include, I have several public engagement coming up and I need to figure out what to do. I am curious about approaches you recommend. How to convert existing in-person engagement to distance, ideas for engaging and maintaining connections with employees remotely. So that's a new one, just recognizing that. And for some people, all of the above. So thank you very much. These are just some of the questions that we've received.
Thanks so much. So here's a little bit about what we're going to talk about in the next little while is some principles for digital engagement, engagement challenges, and our options for responding. Talking about the digital divide and inclusive engagement, some tools and tips, and then some discussion. So we'll start off with what Elizabeth and I both found to be one of the key pieces, is that good quality engagement follows the same principles, whether it's online or offline. So your organization or your own practice may have some guiding perspectives, and we always have to come back to that. So that's our foundational piece. Then from that perspective, we do first things first.
And for Salt Lake City, our engagement, why we do engagement in Salt Lake City, why it is so important to us, it comes down to this little box here. In 2009, our then Salt Lake City leadership agreed that through ordinance that we build trust in city decisions by giving our residents and constituents access to information, help that understand that information, and give them opportunities to participate in city decisions. And to this day, that's what we still follow in our engagement and why it's so important to us.
And then after you've connected with your motivations for engagement, then you clarify your purpose. And there's lots of different ways to get to purpose. Here's just one representation about thinking about what is the opportunity for participant influence. What's on the table, what's off the table? What do you hope to produce that you don't have now out of your engagement? What are the needs of the people you're hoping to engage, both in terms of the content and the process? What's the heat and sensitivity and complexity of the issue? Then you get to your purpose. Once you've got your purpose, that'll help then unfold how you're going to approach the engagement.
So it's really important at first to develop your key messages. In Salt Lake City, we start every process, if it's in person or online, by first developing our engagement plan and then developing talking points that you can call them talking points, you can call them FAQs, you can call them your project summary. But by developing those first, you can then adapt them to each platform, and you're not taking as much time when you're thinking about the platform to develop your messages.
And then another principle we thought was important is to build on your existing skills and experience. Probably you're not going to be as talented as this guy, but we all bring capacities to bear. And it's not about starting and totally, completely fresh. Many organizations already have some investments in using digital tools and doing distributed work and engagement. And so this is just about continuing to build on that. And then I think the last thing in terms of the principles that Elizabeth and I both found was important is that there is no one right way to do this, that we're all figuring it out, we're all testing and experimenting, and because of that, we need to adopt new practices. We need to adapt how we're doing it, which is, I think IAP2 just did that today in terms of thinking about the webinar and how to run it. We need to learn and share our learnings. So those feel like kind of our key kind of foundational approaches to how to do this work. So let's talk a little bit about engagement challenges and options for responding in the time of social distancing. Over to you, Liz.
Thank you. What we'd like to do is just talk a little bit about why it's so important to keep engaging people in these times. Social distancing doesn't mean the end of democracy. This is a phrase that our Salt Lake City Council staff actually developed for our upcoming city council meetings, because we're moving those public meetings online. And really, I love this phrase so much, because in this time, people want to be engaged. They're craving information, and it's not the time for organizations to go dark. Luckily for Salt Lake City, we've been experimenting with digital engagement and blending in-person online engagement for a number of years, and we're starting to use those developed skills now that we need them. The most important thing is it is okay to fail. It's better to make an effort to engage people now than to be too worried of their reaction. People want you to do something. Don't be too scared to try things out, to put yourself out there. And with that, we now want to ask you a question. What are the key challenges for engaging in this time of social distancing and community crisis? And we'll give you a few minutes to answer. Please put your answers just in the question box.
And we're curious about your challenges, because this will help kind of us think a little bit about some of the things we'll share. But something we didn't get a chance to say is that, Elizabeth and I are just two people with two perspectives on this. And truly what we're hoping through these webinars and interactive documents is to create learning together and understanding together. And that's why we feel it's really important to be able to identify what are our challenges. And then later on, we'll also talk about what approaches we all might take. This is a chance to collaborate.
So thanks, thanks Susanna, and thanks Elizabeth. We've got lots of responses here, so I'm going to try and provide as many as I can in about the next 30 seconds. So from Emily, competing priorities. Tamara, getting the attention of the public. Carol, getting people to attend. Time from Jane, time of when to initiate engagement, even if it is online. The lack of secure access framework in the workforce for Trevor, technologies we could use for public engagement, equity for Marcy, working in a multilingual community, 6 major languages that we have to consider in Bellevue, Washington from Brooke, communities experiencing trauma and not feeling able to engage at this time from Elodie, from Paul, how do you engage those without digital access? From Tozen, reaching vulnerable communities who don't have the access to digital engagement, similar to Paul. Getting a focus on the topic. Will people really even care about it? Thank you, Tracy. From Justin, how to deliver effective small group stakeholder workshops. From Jordan, and transitioning existing planned events to an online space. From Matthew, connecting with people who don't have active or skilled access to technology. And we have many, many more, Susanna, and I'm happy to do that, but I'll leave you with those for right now and come back.
So I can tell you, we're going to cover some of those. And for ones we don't get to, I hope that we can cover later for you and connect with you on some ideas. Let me just talk a little bit about what Salt Lake City is doing. Like Susanna said, we are practitioners. I am a government official, and that is my background. But again, this is a time to try things and not to be scared. For Salt Lake City, we're using a lot of tools out there that are actually free for your use. I'm sure if you work for municipalities or if your clients are municipalities or other government agencies, most of them probably have a Twitter account, a Facebook account, possibly Instagram, YouTube, Nextdoor, Reddit. There are a million different social apps out there. Really, it's in this time that you want to start centralizing your messages. You can have accounts redeployed to this common messaging. Maybe you have an account for your mayor's office and your city council office, or your parks department plus your public utilities department. This is the time to start coordinating across departments to send out a common message. There are tools out there for you to use, but if you don't have those resources, you can even simply do it by creating a common calendar. Maybe that's on Microsoft Teams or on Google Calendars. And you can create simple messages to share across all platforms. Again, it goes back to your basic engagement skills. First, build out your general talking points and then modify it to each platform. You can also, if you have multiple accounts, you can echo each other and work with your community partners. Salt Lake City, unfortunately, last week we got hit by a second whammy. We had an earthquake, first time in about 10 years. And something that our mayor did, which has been very wonderful for our community, that she's now putting out daily video messages to our community to help assure them that we are all okay, and also to tell them about what's happening around the city. And that's been really helpful by her putting out messages, and that's us then amplifying her message across accounts to have, again, one central message so they know, whatever organization you're with, that you are there to help your constituents. Social media, also a good way to monitor hot topics. Again, there are programs out there to help. If you don't have those programs, you can create a common database, much like you do a common calendar, to read messages, try to just identify what the common messages are and share them across your team. If we can move to the next slide, Susanna. I know there was a question about public meetings. On your official public meetings, this image you see on your screen is actually our Salt Lake City Council meeting last week. It was the first time we went totally digital with it, and you can see it's still a work in progress. But again, we're trying. Most important thing to move your official public meetings, your city council meetings, your planning commissions, whatever they might be, is to check with your attorneys on the official rules. You may need emergency proclamations like we did to make this happen. Next slide, please. And I would really like to spend most of my time today talking about these virtual public meetings, not the official ones, but the ones that we're replacing these days with town halls or open houses. For Salt Lake City, we primarily use Facebook Live Q&As, and while this is our preferred tool, there are other mediums out there to use, but what I'd really like to do is talk about the process to setting this up and how you follow up with it as well. We started embracing Facebook Live Q&As in January of 2019, and we've been doing it more and more. Right now, we actually average about 2 to 3 a month. And again, I'm going to keep pushing this. While we've moved this online, we're still following our normal engagement processes, which starts with developing an engagement plan and then creating common talking points. And in this process, once we've identified that a Facebook Live Q&A is the way we want to go, we actually have a form for project managers to fill out. So our 2 internal teams, Civic Engagement and SLC Media Services, we have them fill out this form to help us better understand their need, what the problem is they're tackling, and how the project will be, how this project will solve it, and what they want to convey and why. We like forms in Salt Lake City. We also have a form to help with engagement planning with our worksheet, and also to help with our after action reports. And we're happy to share any materials that we may have with this group, if that would be helpful to you. In normal times, we try to get this form in about a month before a Facebook Live Q&A is going to happen, but I can tell you that We had one in-person open house that 2.5 weeks ago was going to be in person, and it'll be a Facebook Live Q&A next Monday morning. So we can bend the rules, but luckily for us, because we had those rules in place, we can accelerate that process when we needed to. Oh, yes.
No, you go ahead. I was going to say something before you move on to the next one.
Oh, no, it's fine. After we have everyone fill out this form, we actually set up a meeting. We love to follow up forms with in-person meetings just so we can talk with the project managers and also anyone who might be on camera. It can be scary for people who aren't used to going on camera, even if they speak in front of a live audience, if they attend meetings as an official. Sometimes with the idea of going on camera, they can get a bit uncomfortable. So what we like to do is have a meeting set up, reassure people what it will be like, and also to do run-throughs. Some other things that we require for our prep is we develop FAQs. If they're not already part of your talking points, we like to develop questions and answers. I'll get to why in a minute. And we also like to develop a call to action. Again, this is just like what you do for in-person engagement. We're asking people to participate now instead of coming to a meeting, participate online. So we like to really explain to them why it's important for them to come. We like to include contact information with the project team, our next steps, how their feedback is going to be used in our city decisions. Also, we'd love to have assets that might be helpful. Again, this is a more visual medium. So having high resolution photos, maps, sometimes it's demonstrating software, say online mapping software through Esri, story maps, etc. We also try to figure out who our partners are. One of the big things, someone asked this in the Q&A, is how do you promote this event? Chances are you know who your community partners are, and it's important to work with your community partners on projects that affect their areas. Maybe it's a neighborhood or a business district. Work with that group and help cross-promote it on your social media. In fact, we now have Facebook Live Q&As where we bring in members of the public, community leaders, to participate with us and explain from their point of view why they want to see this project happen. Things to think about during your presentation. For us in Salt Lake City, it's common to do a 10 to 20 minute presentation, and then we go into questions and answers. It's always good. Again, this is just like in person. You don't know at what level of acknowledgement people are coming to your event. So we want to give them good background information before we just jump right into answering their questions. Other things to remember is leading up to the event, always do a practice run through to make sure people, again, are comfortable on camera, but also to work out any technical details. If you need to tweak the presentation. Big thing is advertising. It goes back to that central messaging. You put it out on social media, we email it to project list, and we send it. We ask our leadership for Salt Lake City, that's our mayor and city council, to push it out as well. And again, we contact our community partners if it's of interest to them. During the event, recommend having presenters arrive in our studio at least an hour before. And I still say it's in our studio because we're still working out how to make this remote, and we're having a presentation on Monday and we still haven't quite figured that part out, but we will. But we also like to do technology checks. A very important thing is that you can have multiple people monitoring questions coming in and then feed those questions to the moderator who's on screen. For us in Salt Lake City, we used a shared Google Doc. And going back to those FAQs, there will always be lags in your presentations. So we have questions queued up for those lag times so we can still answer important points of the project while we're waiting for people to come in and ask their questions. And we always end it the same as we do for in-person. Again, we give them that call to action, the web page address, next steps. Most important thing after the event is that we continue to monitor it. You'll find during your live online events, you might have, for us, we maybe have up to 100 people who tune in live. But afterwards, in the 2 to 3 weeks following, normally we surpass over 1,000 views of our videos. So it's important that we actively monitor that event and again, for us, it's Facebook, and then we will go in and reply to questions as they come in. If anyone's curious to see how we do this live, we're doing one on Monday, March 30th from 10 to 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, and our Facebook handle is Salt Lake City Government. And Susanna, I want to give you a chance before I move on to the other resources.
No, actually, you hit the point I was going to make.
Oh,
so
wonderful. Excellent.
Thanks. You want me to go to the next slide?
Yes, please. Thank you. So what's really important is if you're moving to online engagement is that you move your information, your project information online as well. So if you don't have a practice of creating web pages for different projects, this is the time to start, because you are going to have to start providing that basic information. You probably don't have the time to answer every question you have in, so it's really important to have robust information online for people to go to. Other tools that are out there are online survey and form. There's a lot of different software out there, but that also gives people a chance to respond when they're available. And other great tools are, just like we did in our presentation today, doing those in-meeting polling. If it's a smaller group, you can use tools like Poll Everywhere or Mentimeter, or if you have something like GoToMeetings, you can do it actually in the presentation. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, Susanna.
That was awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all the different ways you're approaching it. And I think we could probably spend another half hour here digging into like, what are you learning as you're doing it? But we also know that there's other things that people are interested in. And it came up even when we were talking about what are the challenges you're facing around the digital divide and inclusion. And so we wanted to share a few kinds of pieces around this. And when we think about the digital divide, I think often our first thing is like basic internet access. But we wanted to provide this framework for you as a way of thinking through what are the challenges that your desired participants might be facing, and therefore, once you've identified possible barriers, ways to approach it. So you might think about basic availability. Now, this is, of course, connectivity basic, and now that libraries and community centers are closed, connectivity does look different, although we do know that many people have connectivity through mobile, so it's not just a black and white question. It's also about availabilities around languages. We heard that. Is the engagement opportunity available in the languages people are most comfortable communicating in? Is there adaptive and assistive technology to support people who are less able to navigate the screens due to like sight issues or other kinds of disability considerations? Around affordability, it is yes, about kind of the plan itself, but sometimes it's also about like if people are paying for the amount of data they're using, then what does that mean in terms of something like this that's very visually heavy, and the impact that that might have on them, and how do we create opportunities that do not require a lot of bandwidth to participate? Awareness, the simple like who knows about the opportunity to participate, and Liz shared some great examples about how to connect with folks, and luckily this is something I know we're all thinking about all the time, is how to make sure that people understand the benefit to them for participating and helping to even get in front of key groups that we want to participate. Abilities is around literacy, skills, and knowledge. And so some of our responses might be around training and development and co-developing the kinds of processes we might use. And lastly, around agency, and this is really about feeling that people are able to act in the world in a way that to bring about change. And I think that this connects with some of the questions around, what's the right time for us to be engaging when there is so much happening for people? There's fear, there's real world material changes in their ability to work and buy groceries and pay rent. And I think we want to think about is this conversation and the people we want to involve, Is this the right time to have this conversation with them? Are there ways we can maybe hear from focus groups rather than a broad public engagement? Because we want to, the attention we're asking for subgroups maybe is better to be placed in ways to support them rather than to ask for things. So I think that kind of agency piece is not only about my self-efficacy, but also about kind of what do people most need in this time. We wanted to ask you the questions about how reaching across that digital divide in all those ways I just talked about, that technology access. What are your ideas for reaching people who have limited internet access in this time of social distancing? What are your ideas for engaging those without internet access, or those with limited, or those with limited? So there are two different questions. One's around reach, people who may not be online very much or at all. And the other is, what are the kinds of activities that you think would be effective for engaging people without or with limited internet access? Again, you could put those ideas into the questions box, and we will summarize everything you put in, and we'll share it out after these webinars are complete.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that, Susanna. We're getting lots of great ideas and thoughts and concerns in the question box right now. So we will share those when we send out the recording and the PowerPoint as well, just so that everyone else knows what other people are thinking about. But here's some responses to your question from Robbie. I think it's important to take this time to be reminded that some folks are always dealing with these sorts of resource and access shortages. If we get better at designing for these folks, we will be better at engagement for all. From Kimberly, they're using telephone town hall meetings. From Renee, we're actually resorting to the old-fashioned mail. And from Carol, the telephone still works. Megan is using text outreach. From Katie, libraries are assuming they're open, and in some cases they're obviously not. Family members supporting the use. All webinars need to have a call-in option from Sophia. Granicus Textizen. So I don't know Granicus Textizen, but maybe you do, which is a text-based survey platform. Other people also talking about texting and phoning. And a question from Alex, do you recommend sending a how to use the technology handout ahead of online engagement session to help participants properly participate? Mailers, and there's much more, which we will share, as we've said, with others, but some food for thought for both you and Elizabeth to go with at the moment, Susanna.
Thanks. And so I'll just answer the one question about sending how to. Absolutely. I think we want to give people a sense of what kinds of technology requirements there are for participating, provide those options like someone suggested around a call-in option. And then if you have questions, have somebody who is provide that kind of how-to document, but also provide a contact, especially if it's happening live, for somebody to ask questions to about how to participate. Liz, let's hear a little bit about how you're approaching it, and then we'll share some more thoughts about addressing inclusion.
I love seeing these ideas come in, because I can tell you, Salt Lake City, we feel we don't have a satisfying answer yet, but again, we're trying to experiment and not being afraid to fail. I noticed that postcard comment come in from quite a few people, and in fact, that's something we're trying. We sent out a citywide postcard for that Facebook Live Q&A I mentioned we're hosting on Monday, and it's the first time we sent a postcard. We did not include technology how-tos. We probably should have, and we probably will for the next time, but that is a really great idea. So blending that in person and online is a good thing. We're also working with our, what we call community councils, these neighborhood groups, to increase our direct contact with constituents. We want to practice good social distancing, but if we can work with our community partners to help those that, because of the digital divide or other reasons, they're not getting our messages through social media, we still want to make sure we give them opportunities to participate. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Susanna.
Sure.
Susanna, if I can, there's just a few more coming in that are a little bit different, and that it responds to Elizabeth's, the importance of connectors, really reaching out to people that you work with on a regular basis and asking them to help out so that they can forward your invitation along, and a few other things. And I just want to to comment really quickly, because this is supposed to be all about learning. Our GoToWebinar also has the ability for people to phone. We actually have the ability for 1,000 people to join us online or by phone. And when we reached, as I said this morning, we had about 920 people on. When we reached 800, our system started to shut down, and we had technical difficulties. And one of the things I've learned from our meeting this morning is that our phone lines are now overwhelmed and people can't join us by phone. So just wanted to share some of the things that we're now learning as we're getting upwards of normal numbers that we would have. Back to you, Susanna.
Thanks so much. Yeah, so we're going to send this out. I don't expect you to be able to read the slide here, but I think that there are a lot of ways we can kind of start to approach inclusion. I'll just read out a few here. So I'm thinking about, first of all, what are the privileges of the group that is doing the organizing? Who are we? What are our identities? What does that enable us to see and not see? And then go out and actually speak with the communities that we're hoping to engage with. What's important to them right now? And that information will then help us figure out what's the best way to approach it, build some relationships. Are there existing initiatives led by those communities that we can support if they want, rather than trying to take their attention and efforts away from things that those communities might be engaging. And thinking about involving people at all stages of the project. And I think the last thing I'll say is the last one on the slide, which is thinking about, are there ways we can support volunteer leadership with honorariums, knowing that, you know, this is a time where people can be challenged, particularly if we're going to be asking people to do some of the work for outreach for us. Can we provide some budget? And I'll say that, you know, that this is a whole community. I went out to the web on Sunday to ask, you know, how do we strengthen equity, diversity, and inclusion and public engagement when we're relying on online options? And Janet Weber from Public Square, Simon Fraser talked about paying people to be involved, pay community ambassadors to facilitate, translate materials, present the content, and create platforms with accessible formats. Give people, resource people where we can. Shauna Sylvester with Simon Fraser University's Center for Dialogue talked about the long game, advocating for policies to bridge the digital divide so people can get online, remembering that this may not be a safe space, so create online spaces that are led by facilitators with lived experiences, and think about how we can co-create. So there's lots more to talk about this, but we have one more section we want to share with you before we close up. And this is around tools and tips for digital engagement. And we've already covered some tools. I wanted to share this cartoon with you, which to reinforce our approach of it has to be purpose-driven, not driven by the tool. So easy to be like, we have to go to Facebook. Well, what do we want to do there? What's our approach? There's a resource here for you, and we'll send it out as we follow up. IAP2 Canada put together or asked me to write a white paper in 2017 about digital engagement. And the one screenshot I have on the right-hand side is different categories and examples of digital tools. And so this is 2017, so this is 3 years ago. The field has evolved, but I think you can still kind of get a sense of what are the possible kind of categories, what we might be looking for. And in a minute, we're going to spend a moment populating what you're using right now, because there's tons of tools out there, but what's working for you? Some things to think about when you're choosing your tool is it something you want to have everybody doing at the same time simultaneously, or is it an at your own pace kind of an activity? And the Facebook Live event is an example of bridging that, doing both, because people can watch the video afterwards. The idea exchange, are ideas going just to you? Can people see one another's contributions, or can people actually collaborate and explore ideas together? What kind of a conversation do you want to have? What's the size of the group? That'll help change how you're going to approach it. Do you want people to be anonymous or known? And actually studies show that this actually doesn't impact the quality of engagement as much as we might think it does. That is it ongoing? Is it one-off? Are there other important considerations for you to think about? But this is what you're starting to think about. What's our approach going to be? Here's some of the considerations. Some must-dos for online meetings like this: be clear about the technology requirements for participation. Ensure the technology meets your privacy requirements. So, for example, Zoom with the breakout meetings or the breakout groups is a tool that I'm loving to use to bring people together, because you can have the benefit of the plenary presentation and then small group discussions. And I often use a Google Doc to support collaboration in those small group discussions, but it may not meet the privacy requirements of a government because the servers, or in Canada because the servers are in the US. So that's an example. Do a test run with the technology. Liz talked about that too. I really like to host a back channel for your team to communicate during the live session. If you're not all in the same place, which in this time of social distancing, we're likely not, have a WhatsApp group going on, or a Skype chat, or some other place for you to be able to talk with each other and say, my group's just about done, or I don't think people are seeing the visuals properly. Ask people to come before the session starts so that they can make sure the technology is working. And I don't know if you've heard about this, but if you're hosting an open meeting, there's been, which means like open link, no registration, that it can be a good idea to require registration, or don't give everyone access to the screen share or unmuting, because there's been some inappropriate sharing of audio visual content on public meetings. And so you want to kind of think about how to ensure the safety of others who are participating. Around the process, important to have a clear purpose, a powerful invitation, identify and address barriers to participation, set a welcoming and intentional container for the work. Make the agenda as interactive and engaging as possible. You'll see we did polling, we did stop to put your content in through the questions. We're about to use different technologies. And provide technical instructions on an as-needed basis rather than loading it all up at the front. And finally, have a strategy and assigned roles for harvesting the input shared. How are you going to take the ideas shared and actually use that information afterwards? Because of course, we want to honor the time and effort people are giving us by saying we're paying attention to what you're sharing. So we're curious, what digital engagement tools do you use and why? So we created 3 versions of the exact same questions. They're all free, they're Google tools. And these are things you could be running simultaneously to your event. And if you look in the chat, I think Drew sent out these links earlier. And so let's take a minute. Click on one of these links. Maybe you haven't used a Google spreadsheet before. Maybe you haven't used a Google document before. Or because there's 100 people maximum for each of those 2 items, if you bump into that max, you can click on the survey and fill it out as well. So take a minute. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Susanna, are you also able to open it up? Because some people haven't received it. Are you able to open up any of those documents from your screen to show people?
To show them? Sure, yeah. But it is in the chat, right? Everybody's able to see that?
Yes,
Yeah.
they were sent out 11:39 this morning, as a matter of fact. So they all got out to the entire audience.
So I'll just open up the spreadsheet here, and let's see if I can change what I'm sharing. Oops, Google Chrome. So here's the collaborative spreadsheet. What we did was because we weren't sure how many people were going to be on here at once, we've asked you to click on the tab or the sheet that corresponds with the letter of your first name, so that we're not all trying to squeeze into one sheet at one time. And so you can see here we've got 34 under A to E, and for those people's first name starts with F to J, that we've got 13 different ones. And some of the tools people are suggesting are WebEx and Zoom and conference calls, Maptionaire, Skype and Hangout, telephone town halls, lots of meetings, Bang the Table, GoToMeeting. So thanks for those that are putting them in. I can see it right now that you're putting them in. I'll bring up the document so you can see that version. Oops.
So I just want to reflect just a little bit as Susanna's doing this. We were asking Susanna how many people were going in and responding, because we also had this available for our first session this morning, and she was watching 84 people responding, or at least looking at some of these different Google Sheets. at the same time. So it is another way for people to keep responding. So we always wonder, how do you hear from people that don't want to speak up, don't want to put things in a question box? So by putting this out there, we're still giving people the opportunity to comment, even if they don't necessarily want to fully participate in the online, whatever the online version is that we're using.
And particularly something like GoToMeeting that we're using here, which has it's meant as a broadcast tool, information from one space out. That this is a nice way to kind of hack that system and create space where people can collaborate and see each other's ideas. And so I was saying, like, I use Zoom a lot right now to do breakout focused conversations. I'll have one version of my worksheet for each group, and then I try to get the group to be about 5 to 8 people, and then they can type and talk and build knowledge together as they go.
So, Susanna, just quickly, we do know the limitation for Google Sheets and Google Documents with governments. So any workarounds or any suggestions, Susanna?
Yeah. So the one that I'm trying to do with a client right now is, I'm going to have to stop sharing my screen for a second. I'll change my screen share so I'm not showing my emails. Let's see. There's a Microsoft collaborative doc. I won't be able to see it. Microsoft has a suite. Maybe it's one. Anybody know? Put it into the questions box. So Microsoft
Susanna,
does.
I'll take the screen back right now if you want to.
That's okay, Drew. I think.
Yeah, I'll just take a second here and take a look. Yeah, and so you can also do it on SharePoint, where you are, you can provide access to people via SharePoint to collaborate, but it's very slow, so I don't like it very much for the simultaneous engagement. Let's see.
Yeah, people are sending in tips, SharePoint, OneDrive, OneNote,
yes.
Teams,
OneNote.
other
Yeah.
ones. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there are ways to get around it, and none of them are as good as Google Doc for large, but especially if you have a group who you're working with in an ongoing way or have internal, Drew, I'll take it back now, who have internal access, then those can be really useful pieces. So we're getting close to the end. Yeah.
Susanna, we can't see your screen yet.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And I just wanted to quickly comment because we're getting a lot of questions. We know that some of you have not yet received the note, the email that we sent out, that Drew sent out earlier on. Please check your trash. Sometimes it goes into there, so please check that. And Drew will also send out another link to these after we finish today's webinar. So please, it's coming. If you haven't received it, please check your trash. Otherwise, we'll send you out another one and see what we can do. Thank you, Susanna.
Yeah, so I'm just going to quickly share the title or quickly show you the slides of resources that'll be sent out, and then I'll stop and see if we can get a couple questions in. So there's some roles for online meetings you want to think about. We're going to share a list of desirable features of virtual meeting tools. We'll share some ideas about how to harvest digital meeting results. We'll share this kind of things about how much time you should budget for in terms of different participant engagement activities. So those are a couple things. All right.
And Susanna, just to let you know, we are not seeing your full PowerPoint at the moment. We're seeing your notes page as well.
Thank you. Great. Okay, so do we have some time for questions?
Well, you've actually been answering a lot of the questions as you went along, to be honest. So I don't know if you do want to go back and just check in on some of the slides you just quickly went through. People are still asking questions about tools, which you are responding to and actually responding to your questions. So perhaps your choice, Susanna, and then we'll come back if there's other existing questions.
Liz, any thoughts about what you would like to do in our remaining time?
I think maybe go through some of the questions we see. I think that might be helpful to people.
Okay.
I know they're, oh, I apologize, Amelia.
No, that's okay. Happy to do that. I know, Liz, you can also have access to the questions. So if you see some that you would like to respond to, please do so. And I think another one that we continue to get, Susanna, if you want to think about while Liz is looking at hers, is just this whole sensitivity to difficult times. And do people really care about what we're interested in at the moment? Is it time to defer some things? So maybe just a thought on that. But Liz, why don't you go through with answering some of the other questions you see?
Yeah. There were a couple of questions I saw asking about privacy and sharing people's personal information. And again, for us in Salt Lake City, that goes back to our standard engagement practices. We have a policy that we share all comments we receive during any engagement run. But however, our policy is, and oftentimes this is determined by state law, we remove all personal identifying information. So while we might receive questions and answers, and we will respond to that person knowing who they are, when we present that to the public in the official record, we remove that identifying information.
And I think the piece around what's the right time to be doing engagement will depend on your community and your topic. And I think right now, as we're all finding a new reality, as some of the financial support packages are being discussed and haven't come in, I think it's wise for us to all pause on all non-essential engagement. And then at a certain point in time, maybe it's a couple weeks for your community, maybe it's longer. People are going to want to have other things to do. And so for this public facing stuff, I think that it can be okay to test with your community. Is it all right to keep having this conversation? Of course, if there are essential components or very, very time sensitive, we can continue with engagement, I feel, but just communicate why we're continuing to go ahead and not pretending that there aren't a lot of things going on for people that are different from that. Those are some thoughts I have, I think, and it's just and to be iterative, like that whole kind of slide at the beginning about adapt, adopt, learn, and share, I think is part of what we're doing. And there's a piece here about not needing to be perfect. That as we do this engagement, I think let's be honest about our learning, doing it together, so that we're bringing people in and being human about it, and where we can, having fun, so that it's a time where I think we use the word social distancing because that's sort of the scientific term, but I've heard a lot of people talking about social connecting and physical distancing. And so can public engagement around policy choice making and all the other topics we're doing be an opportunity for social connecting on issues that matter to people while we're physical distancing? Back to you, Liz.
Well, I can just echo that thought. This is the time, and depending if your community wants to go on with engagement projects right now, that is a community decision. In Salt Lake City, we're trying to do it all right now because we want to show people that we're still here for them. We're still picking up their garbage every day. The water is still coming through the pipes. And that's why it's important for us to continue these projects, because we feel that if we put a pause in them, we might have trouble picking back up. But it really is your community's decision. And remember that IAP2 USA and Canada, it's wonderful resources out there, just like this session today, the one this morning, the ones coming up, just to talk with other practitioners and to rely on each other for tips and tools, things like that.
Which is, I think, a good way to segment to the next steps. And before I pass it back over to you, Drew and Amelia, we are hoping to have some coffee chats where we use Zoom to have these breakout discussions. We can have more intimate exploring. And if anybody on the call has a Zoom Enterprise account, if you could contact Amelia or let's say Amelia to let her know. And many of us have the Zoom paid account, which allows for 100 people to participate. But if we can get somebody who has an enterprise account, that we could get 300 people participating in these breakout conversations, I think that could be both an incredible experience and also really useful for all of us. So if you have an enterprise account or you know somebody who does, please be in touch. Over to you guys.
Thanks very much, Susanna. And thank you very much to Elizabeth as well. As we've been talking about today, we're all still continuing to learn, and we will all continue to learn for weeks and months to come on how we actually approach online engagement, when to do it, when not to do it, how to do it, and the tools that we might need. Our promise to you right now is to make sure that we send you out the presentations, both from this morning's session and the current session underway, and we'll be back out with more information soon.